So imagine you're driving down this massive single-lane highway, and every delivery truck in the entire world has to pass through this one specific stretch of road.
Right, a total bottleneck.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, out of nowhere, there's a roadblock. Nothing can get through. That is basically the terrifying reality of our global energy supply today. Because if the Strait of Hormuz closed tomorrow, I mean, the global economy wouldn't just slowly bleed out over months. It would literally go into cardiac arrest in a matter of days.
It really would. We're talking about a scenario where, roughly 20% of the world's oil is held hostage by this tiny stretch of water, a stretch of water you could practically swim across if you were ambitious enough.
Yeah, the maps in our source material estimate something like 17 to 19 million barrels of oil per day squeeze through that maritime choke point.
Which is a massive, massive volume. It's unbelievable. And if a conflict, or even just an accident, shuts that down, the cascading effects are immediate. Factories in Asia go dark, European energy prices shatter records overnight, and global supply chains just grind to a halt.
Yeah, it's arguably the single most critical vulnerability in modern human infrastructure. We've built this incredibly complex, hyper-optimized global economy, but it ultimately relies on geography. We just can't change.
Right. A narrow shipping lane we can't guarantee will always stay open.
Exactly. The whole system is basically built on the assumption of uninterrupted flow through a very, very volatile region.
Which brings us to the mission of today's deep dive. We're exploring this fascinating rapid deployment strategy that's designed specifically to solve that terrifying economic bottleneck.
It's a really unique approach. It is. So, our source material today is a strategic concept document. It's titled The Global Energy Corridor System, prepared in March 2026 by Ali Hokrek. He's an independent researcher and concept developer based in Turkey. And this paper outlines just a massive, technology-driven rewiring of how energy moves across the planet.
And, the author is addressing a problem that analysts have debated for decades, but the proposed solution fundamentally shifts the parameters.
How so?
Well, typically, when faced with a geographic bottleneck, the industry's instinct is to just try and overpower it, right? Build a bigger pipeline alongside it, increase naval patrols, maybe stockpile reserves.
Right, purely defensive measures.
Exactly, defensive. But this concept document flips the script entirely. It focuses heavily on systemic redundancy instead of brute force.
And this matters directly to you listening right now. I mean, whether you're an economics nerd mapping out global trade flows or prepping for a board meeting or just someone who pays for gas and electricity, understanding how to unjoke global trade is vital for your wallet because the cost of living is tied directly to the cost of transit. Okay, let's unpack this. How does this document propose we fix a bottleneck we literally can't bypass with traditional shipping?
Well, it starts by just totally abandoning the idea of replacing the Strait of Hormuz.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the sheer volume of liquid energy moving through there makes a one-to-one replacement physically impossible. So instead, the core philosophy of the global energy corridor system is to make the strait, quote, non-critical.
Non-critical, I like that.
The author argues that you neutralize a choke point not by building a wider road, but by removing the necessity of that specific road altogether.
That is such a good framing. It's essentially like building the Waze app for oil.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah, because Waze doesn't pave new highways, right? It surveys the entire grid. So if there's a massive wreck on the interstate, the app instantly reroutes all the traffic through side streets and frontage roads. You might slow down a bit, but you never actually stop moving. And this concept seems to envision a multi-route distribution system operating on that exact same central distribution logic.
That analogy captures the mechanism perfectly. The document details a system flow structure that is completely designed around constant adaptability. Under normal circumstances, the flow is just optimized for cost.
Makes sense.
But let's say the primary Gulf route is compromised. The system dynamically shifts the export load to a western route that terminates in the Red Sea.
Okay, but what if the Red Sea gets risky? Because we've definitely seen that happen.
Right, a scenario we are very familiar with. If naval tensions elevate the risk there, the system just throttles down that western flow and surges capacity north. It pushes it through the Anatolian Peninsula via Türkiye. And if that northern route gets disrupted, the network pivots southward, pushing volume to ocean export terminals in Oman. The real mantra woven throughout this source document is that the system never stops. It only reroutes.
What's fascinating here is that conceptual leap, It's moving from protecting a specific piece of infrastructure to protecting the flow itself.
Mm,
Because the world doesn't need a new pipeline, it needs a resilient system.
exactly.
If you build a network that renders a blockade ineffective, you strip away the geopolitical leverage of anyone trying to threaten that choke point.
Yeah.
You make the threat totally useless.
And to actually implement that, you have to look at the hardware already on the map. We have to realize we are massively underutilizing it. If we want dynamic routing, we need physical pathways.
Right. So where exactly is this oil going? Let's trace these routes, because mapping out the physical steel makes this so much easier to understand. The source material outlines the North Corridor first.
Right, the North Corridor. This is a route that connects the Gulf directly to Europe. It flows up through Iraq, crosses into Turkey, and then hooks right into those massive European energy markets.
And using existing pipes, right?
Heavily relying on existing heavy infrastructure, yeah. That's why the author believes this is actually feasible. The North Corridor utilizes the Kirkuk-Ceyhan pipeline, but then it taps into the huge natural gas arteries crossing Turkey.
Like PANAP and PAP, right?
Exactly. The Trans-Anatolian Natural Gas Pipeline and the Trans-Adriatic Pipeline. The maps in the document even incorporate connections extending all the way eastward toward the Shah Deniz II gas field in Azerbaijan. It basically creates this massive, high-volume northern bridge.
Okay, then there is the West Corridor. Let me jump in on this one, because this takes the energy from the Gulf, shoots it straight across the Arabian Peninsula, and outputs into the Red Sea.
Yes, exactly.
The maps show it heavily utilizing the East-West pipeline, the Petroline. So it starts near the processing hubs in Jubail and Abqaiq, goes across the entire Saudi desert, and ends at the Yanbu export terminal. So ships can just load up at Yanbu and either head north to the Suez Canal or south to the Indian Ocean, completely bypassing the eastern side of the peninsula.
And that bypass is incredibly critical. But, it only solves part of the equation if the Red Sea itself gets volatile. So to get total coverage, the system incorporates the South Corridor.
The final escape valve.
Exactly. This acts as the ultimate pressure release valve straight into the open ocean. It connects Abu Dhabi to Fujairah and the deepwater export terminals in Oman.
Oh, wow.
By utilizing infrastructure like the Habshan-Fujairah pipeline, the energy moves overland and drops directly into the Gulf of Oman and the Arabian Sea. So from there, supertankers have a clear, totally unobstructed path to Asian markets.
Okay, wait. I have to pause and look at this from the perspective of a skeptic for a second. Because looking at these maps, I see TANAP, I see Petroline, the Habshan-Fujairah line. These are existing pipelines. They've been in the ground for years, decades even. So aren't we just taking a red marker, circling a bunch of disjointed legacy pipelines on a map and calling it a new system? How is this actually new?
That's a fair point, and the document explicitly addresses that reality. A vast majority of the required steel is already in the ground.
Right.
The revolutionary leap here isn't about laying thousands of miles of new pipe. It's about the integration and the synchronization of those disjointed assets. Because right now, these pipelines operate in complete silos.
Oh, so they don't talk to each other.
Not at all. Petroline has its own operational logic and contracts. TANAP has its own. They don't communicate. They don't load balance with each other.
Okay, so the innovation is the nervous system connecting them, not the bones themselves.
Precisely. The proposal advocates unifying these separate sovereign corridors into a digitally monitored, synchronized distribution hub. It aligns all the export terminals, the massive coastal storage facilities, and the port logistics under one central command logic.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so in a fully integrated system, if there's a pressure drop or an interruption in an Iraqi pipeline, it would instantly trigger an automated corresponding output increase at the Yanbu terminal in Saudi Arabia. That level of real-time cross-border synchronization is what turns isolated legacy pipes into a resilient network.
Okay, which brings up a massive logistical hurdle, the timeline. Because when international energy consortiums talk about infrastructure of this scale, the timelines are usually measured in decades. We usually hear, by 2045, we hope to have this operational. Yet this document maps out a 36-month sprint, 3 years to restructure global energy flows. How on earth is the author proposing to do this fast enough to matter?
It sounds impossible, but the author achieves that aggressive timeline by breaking the project into 3 highly pragmatic phases, and they front-load all the optimizations that don't require heavy construction.
Ah, okay. What's phase 1?
Phase 1 is the immediate action phase, covering months 0 to 6. The objective here is strictly optimizing existing flows. You maximize the capacity of the Red Sea terminals just by untangling bureaucratic customs bottlenecks.
So just paperwork, basically.
Paperwork and chemistry. They propose deploying chemical drag-reducing agents in the pipelines to increase flow rates without having to increase pump pressure. And they expand temporary above-ground storage to act as shock absorbers in the network. The author calculates that these process optimizations alone reduce dependency on Hormuz by 20 to 30% in just half a year.
Wow, 20 to 30% just from auditing and optimizing current processes. That is a staggering reduction in risk. So then we hit phase 2, which covers months 6 to 18. And the document outlines a rapid capacity expansion here, relying heavily on modular, scalable solutions. They specifically point to FSRUs, floating storage regasification units.
Right. And FSRUs are brilliant for this. They're essentially floating plug-and-play LNG terminals. So instead of spending 5 years pouring concrete for a coastal facility, you lease a specialized vessel, park it at a strategic node, connect it to the grid, and boom, you instantly have import, export, and storage capacity.
That's incredible.
Combined with deploying parallel mini pipelines and modular tank farms, the author projects that by month 18, dependency on the Strait of Hormuz plummets by 50 to 60%.
Okay, but wait. FSRUs are massively backordered globally right now, aren't they? Every country scrambling for energy independence since 2022 has been trying to lease or buy them. Where is the author suggesting we find a whole fleet of plug-and-play terminals in less than a year and a half?
It's a huge challenge. The strategy relies heavily on repurposing existing commercial vessels and securing strategic leases through the sovereign wealth funds of the participating transit countries.
So using sheer financial force.
Exactly. By elevating this from a mere corporate procurement issue to a matter of critical national security for Gulf states, the document assumes the capital and the geopolitical weight will just force those vessels to the front of the line. It's an aggressive assumption, definitely, but mathematically, if secured, it cuts the choke points relevance in half.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because phase 3, this is months 18 to 36, is where the document transitions from industrial engineering to deep tech.
Yes, the digital layer.
Yeah, the diagrams for this final integration phase, I mean, they look more like a Silicon Valley network architecture schematic than an oil and gas project. The author mandates running high-capacity fiber optic cables alongside the entirety of the pipeline routes. We're talking about Ethernet ring topologies wrapping around all this infrastructure.
And there's a very specific reason for that. By utilizing Ethernet ring topologies, the network boasts a sub-50 millisecond recovery time.
That is incredibly fast.
It has to be. If a node in southeastern Turkey gets severed by an accident or an attack, the network architecture instantly redirects the data flow in the opposite direction around the ring. The central command center never loses visibility, not even for a fraction of a second.
Right. The control room cannot go blind. And I noticed the source material also details deploying thousands of remote terminal units, RTUs, and advanced pressure detectors. What exactly is the author doing with all these sensors and fiber optics?
They are turning dumb steel into a highly reactive, smart Internet of Things. And all of this data feeds directly into an AI-supported routing system.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the AI isn't simply displaying pipeline pressure on a dashboard. It is constantly ingesting and analyzing massive global data sets. It ingests geopolitical news sentiment, localized weather data, global shipping lane traffic, along with internal pipeline flow metrics.
Wait, so it's predicting problems before they happen?
Exactly. If the model predicts, say, a 60% probability of a maritime strike in the Red Sea based on sudden naval movements or localized conflict data, it doesn't wait for a ship to actually be hit.
It reroutes automatically.
Right. It preemptively throttles down the Yanbu terminal flow, ramps up storage utilization, and slowly begins increasing flow toward the northern Anatolian route before a single physical disruption occurs.
That is wild. A predictive, self-healing energy grid managing millions of barrels of crude and LNG. And by month 36, when this AI-driven smart routing infrastructure is fully online, the author projects that global dependency on the Strait of Hormuz will drop by an astounding 70 to 80%.
Yes, and if 80% of the flow can effortlessly detour around a choke point, that choke point ceases to exist as a weapon.
But, building a military-grade, AI-driven infrastructure that spans 3 distinct geopolitical zones introduces a massive problem. Sovereignty and security. If you build the most advanced, hyper-connected energy network on the planet, it instantly becomes the world's biggest target. You can't just put a chain link fence around a pumping station in the desert and expect it to survive.
Oh, absolutely. And the author is acutely aware of that reality. The concept outlines a multi-layered security framework that treats this entire corridor system as a transnational military asset.
Okay, so it's not just local guards.
Far from it. While physical protection forces are necessary, the true defensive posture relies on the sky and the code. The system demands dedicated satellite infrastructure, constantly monitoring the thousands of miles of pipeline for thermal anomalies or unauthorized proximity. We are talking about automated, persistent drone surveillance systems patrolling the remote stretches of the network 24/7.
And energy corridors are no longer just economic assets anymore. They are strategic security infrastructure. Because when you digitize a pipeline to that degree, when an AI is controlling the valves and the flow logic, a hacker sitting half a world away becomes just as dangerous as a physical explosive.
Exactly. The cybersecurity protecting those digital control systems has to be totally impenetrable, because a breach doesn't just mean stolen data. It means the potential to physically rupture pipelines by overriding pressure safety protocols.
Right, they could just blow the pipes from a laptop.
Which is why this requires unprecedented international security coordination. The intelligence agencies of the transit countries would have to share threat data in real time, treating the corridor's defense as a shared existential priority.
Which naturally leads to the question of the wallet. Ownership and finance. You have this massive infrastructure crossing Iraq, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Oman. It's protected by drones, satellites, and military-grade cyber defenses. Who is writing the check for this, and how does the author propose structuring the ownership so that no single country feels threatened by another's control?
Well, the financial model proposed is just as networked as the physical pipelines. A project of this magnitude simply cannot rely on the treasury of a single sovereign government. So the author outlines an international financial consortium structure.
Okay, who's in it?
You integrate sovereign wealth funds from the Gulf nations, obviously, because they have a direct existential need to guarantee their exports reach the market safely. But then you bring in international development banks like the World Bank and the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank.
Because their whole mandate is global economic stability.
Exactly. And nothing stabilizes the global economy quite like neutralizing massive energy shocks. The document also highlights utilizing public-private partnerships to help fund the localized infrastructure upgrades.
But the long-term vision they outlined for managing this is what really caught my eye. Because they don't just want a loose treaty or a consortium, they actually propose institutionalizing this entire network under a singular corporate entity, the Global Energy Corridor Company.
Yes. It is a radical evolution in infrastructure management. This central company would manage all the capital investments, operate the complex transit logistics, coordinate the international maintenance schedules, and collect the transit usage fees. It centralizes all the accountability.
And then the author takes it a step further. They suggest taking this entity public, an IPO for the Global Energy Corridor Company.
It's a fascinating idea.
It is. They're advocating for transforming a geopolitical security project into a massive global investment platform. Theoretically, retail investors like you or I or everyday pension funds could buy shares in the infrastructure that prevents global economic collapse.
And you have to consider the alternative here. If a single nation owns the corridor, other nations will always view it with suspicion. They might even seek to undermine it. But by taking the company public and inviting global investment, you align the financial incentives of the entire world with the security of the energy flow.
That is brilliant.
Right. If a European pension fund, an Asian sovereign wealth fund, and retail investors globally are all drawing dividends from the smooth operation of this network, the geopolitical appetite for disrupting it drops to near zero. An attack on the corridor basically becomes an attack on everyone's portfolio. It is a highly sophisticated mechanism for engineering peace through shared financial vested interests.
Let's pull back and look at the whole board here. We started with a terrifying vulnerability. The Strait of Hormuz threatening the stability of the global economy. And the solution proposed by Ali Hukrek isn't just defensive posturing. It's a construction of a dynamic, physical, and digital web. 3 corridors running north, west, and south, integrated by predictive AI, deployed in a rapid 36-month sprint, protected by persistent drone and satellite overwatch, and funded by a globally traded super company.
It's breathtaking in its scope.
It really is. It forces us to stop viewing energy transit as a series of isolated pipes. It is, at its core, a global economic stability and supply chain security project. So what does this all mean?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it proves we have the technological and logistical capacity to engineer our way out of historical geographic traps. For over a century, the power of a choke point has dictated foreign policy, it's driven military deployments, and shaped the global balance of power. What this concept document illustrates is that the leverage of a physical choke point can be entirely erased by the flexibility of a smart network. Adaptability becomes the ultimate form of security.
And that leads me to a final lingering thought for you to chew on today. If the global energy corridor system is actually built and successfully makes the Strait of Hormuz non-critical, it fundamentally rewrites global geopolitics. Think about it. If nations and state actors can no longer hold the global economy hostage by threatening a single narrow strait, how much power suddenly shifts away from the gatekeepers of the water?
A tremendous amount.
Right. And where does it go? It shifts directly to the transit countries. Places like Türkiye, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, and Oman, the nations that are actually hosting the digital network, the AI hubs, and the physical pipes. They become the new, indispensable anchors of global trade. What does the world look like when the geography of energy weaponization simply ceases to work, and power transitions to those who maintain the Waze app for global energy? Keep questioning the infrastructure that runs your world. We'll see you on the next Deep Dive.